This is the Crowd Crux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What's up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Thank you for tuning in here today. And if it's your first time listening, on this show, we talk about crowdfunding. We get to the brass tacks of how to successfully raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. We do that by not only my own intuition, my own knowledge of marketing, and having helped many different projects over the years, we also bring on guests, people who have successfully raised money on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And today's guest actually has a very well-worn history. He's been in the industry as the same time that I have, since 2012. So he has earned his stars and stripes. You know, he's been battling out there, raising money with different campaigns. He's actually launched over 15 campaigns on Kickstarter. So this is a crowdfunding veteran. It's very rare we have veterans on the show. He's launched many different campaigns. His current project has raised over $200,000 on Kickstarter. He's raised millions of dollars with some of his campaigns. Other ones closer to $200K, $300K, some as low as $2,000. So he has a very good, broad perspective on how crowdfunding works. And when you listen to today's episode, you're not only going to learn the things that he's discovered throughout the years, but you're also going to learn some of the practical tips and practical strategies for raising money online. So for example, he actually shares one secret or one trick that he's learned to be able to increase the pledge amount, to increase the amount that people are backing your project for, and to make certain reward tiers actually look more attractive than other reward tiers. Kind of like a subtle psychological secret, if you will. So you're going to learn that and many more things. My guest is a lot more fast talking than I am, so I hope that you catch everything. If not, always go and check out some of the show notes. I try to include any kind of links that I catch or resources that I think are important from these interviews. And finally, I guess the final announcement that I want to make before we get into this podcast episode is, if you've been following me for a while, you might not know much of, I really don't share very much, I think, of my story. I want to share a little bit more and be more transparent, but tomorrow I am actually boarding a plane to go back to El Salvador for the first time since I was adopted at the age of 1. So I was adopted at the age of 1 from El Salvador. I grew up in Massachusetts, a very small town, maybe a couple miles outside of Concord, Mass, a small suburban town. So I grew up there, a predominantly white community, also I'd say Asian and Indian, but I didn't really have very much exposure to my culture. My parents always tried to enroll me in Spanish classes, and I didn't really want to learn Spanish when I was younger. I just wasn't into it. I also just wasn't as much into the culture, the Spanish culture, when I was younger. I don't know, it didn't make very much sense to me. And all of my peers, I always felt very welcomed being an adopted child. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I went to college in Washington, D.C. Then I moved to New York shortly after. I've been in New York for a number of years. And it's only recently when I begun to want to discover my roots, begin to tap into this culture, which I could have grown up into, this entire different life, could have grown up in an entirely different country, have different surroundings, have different influences. And I want to sort of get a little bit more exposure to that. It was actually after watching the movie Lion that I kind of realized, wow, this is really possible. If I wanted to, I could go back to El Salvador. I could try to discover new things, find my birth mother, possibly, and just kind of see what the culture is like and get a sense of this missing part of myself. So that's kind of a small story I want to share today before we get into the podcast, just so you get to know me a little bit more. I'm very privileged nowadays to be able to travel and do these different things, and I feel just so privileged to have grown up in a first world country where I really can't ask for anything more. Great education, great parents, great family, everything like that. I feel very blessed, and I'm excited for this upcoming trip. So I guess that's the one story I want to share. The other thing I'll just very quickly say is, if you want to stay up to date with some of the other stuff that I have coming out, work related, my crowdfunding articles, my YouTube videos, all this kind of stuff, you can go to crowdcrux.com/subscribe, enter your email address there, and you'll start getting weekly emails from me. But without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Sandy, welcome so much to the podcast. Looking forward to talking with you. You are a veteran Kickstarter creator, man, having done over 16 projects. We're talking a bit before the interview. Not all of them successful, but still, that's a lot of great work. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
Cool, man. I wanted to actually ask you, so when we were just talking before the interview, you were mentioning some of those early projects that sort of are your stars and stripes when it comes to Kickstarter. You're getting a sense of the field, you're getting a sense of what goes into a successful campaign. Can you tell me just a little bit about those early projects before we get into some of the other amazing ones you've done and also the one that you're currently doing?
Sure. I mean, my projects, in my head, they fall into three categories. One is the ones that outright failed, that essentially we canceled the funding because, we didn't make it, or we weren't going to make it, so we just canned it. And my very first project actually falls into that category. That was when I first dipped into Kickstarter in 2012. In November, I was trying to do a digital game called Cthulhu World Combat, and for Steam or iPhone, and the funding on that just didn't go very well. So I said, I guess Kickstarter is a bust, and I abandoned it. And then went back to my other things. And then my business partner said, well, let's try it for a board game. And I thought that was a crazy idea because at the time I'd done only digital stuff for 20 years. And I'd done board games in the 80s.
Okay.
But I hadn't done it since 1988. So I just thought board games I played them all the time. I loved them. But I didn't think of them as a thing that was of the future,
This is your first board game.
What?
This is the first board game you ever created then?
Oh, no. I created a board game back in 1987.
Okay.
It was the first one since then. So I went in there and said, okay, well, I will do my ultimate board game and see if it goes anywhere. And I had no plans at that time of creating a company for it or any kind of ongoing thing. My actual plan was I had already gotten a job to work for a digital company as kind of their head designer and creative manager. Mm-hmm. And I thought that before I went work at the company, I would put together a little board game. It would maybe earn a couple $100,000 and set up a little cash cow to support me. But instead, I put it up, and it was at over $100,000 the first day, and then it eventually was well over $1 million. This was Cthulhu Wars in the summer of 2013, and it was this huge hit. So I called the company and said, "Hey, I can't come. I got to manage this." And so Cthulhu Wars I did it as an over-the-top, the ultimate Sandy Peterson game. I'm famous for doing horror type subjects, particularly Lovecraftian monsters. And this was my ultimate Lovecraftian monster giant figure board game to end all board games for me. And then after that, I was going to go off and work for the company and do iPhone games. Well, instead of being my swan song, it was this giant success and became like a phoenix. I actually founded my company. I'm now in Peterson Games, and we said, hey, let's keep going. So we did of my 16 projects, many of them are actually expansions of or different language versions of the original Cthulhu Wars. But I also have other games I've done as well. Some of them have brought to me, like Theomachy is a game about warring gods playing poker, and that was brought to me by a Polish company that wanted us to publish it. So I added a little bit of my own because all of the games of Peterson Games have to have something by me, and then publish that. Then that other companies would come and say, do a game on our licensed property. So that's where Orcs Must Die, the board game, came from. And then there's some of our own personal games. The Gods War, for example, made about $600,000.
Wow.
And we just kept going. We have one going on right now, Planet Apocalypse, which is again one of our personal ones. It's currently 200% funded. We're hoping to see even more. Of course, we got half the project left to go.
Yeah, and I urge everyone, go and check out Planet Apocalypse on Kickstarter. You can see everything that has to offer. And man, your name also, I just love your name, like Sandy Peterson. That's such a cool name. It's like, it's a Sandy Peterson game. You're blessed with a great branded name there.
Well, I cannot take any credit for that name, you understand. It was entirely based on my parents. Actually, They named me Carl. But I had an Uncle Carl, and so to distinguish me from my Uncle Carl, since my middle name was Sanford, they called me Sandy.
Oh, okay.
Uncle Carl has gone to his reward long ago, but the Sandy stuck, and so I'm always known as Sandy everywhere. Of course, in high school it was not a burden exactly, but it was a pain because Sandy is more commonly a female name.
Yeah. That's true.
It's not female. I still get, but it actually has been useful because if someone calls and asks to speak to Miss Sandy Peterson, or I get a letter to Miss Sandy Peterson or Ms. Sandy Peterson, then I know it's someone that doesn't know me, and I can take steps appropriately.
That is true. That's a hidden benefit right there. I do want to get into advice, strategy, and tactics, all that kind of stuff. But while we have you here, I really want to explore, for you and your perspective as a veteran creator, what Kickstarter has done for your career. And you mentioned being kind of skeptical of it initially and not really wanting to do this project, being very skeptical as a designer. Could you talk a little bit about what Kickstarter has allowed board gamers and board game creators to do than otherwise?
Sure. Let's talk about my skepticism first. What happened is that the first thing I did was for a digital product, because that's what I've been doing for 20 years, digital games. I worked on the computer game Civilization, Sid Meier's Civilization. I did work on Doom and Quake and the whole Age of Empire series. I was in some leading games, and this time I was kind of on my own at a small company, and I said, well, I'll do a digital game because that's my ballpark, and I know how to do it. And my friends told me about Kickstarter, my business partners, and said, let's try it there. So tried it there, it flopped. And even today, digital games, though they sometimes succeed on Kickstarter, usually need extra funding beyond Kickstarter. They fail more often than board. It's not the happiest. It's not necessarily the best source for digital games, right? And then they said, well, do a board game because you know how to do board games. And I said, well, I guess I wasn't unfamiliar with how board games had done, and I saw that there was a game that came out in the fall called Kingdom Death Monster, which scored like a couple $1 million on Kickstarter. And I said, well, that's obviously an outlier. I would never do anything like that. And what happened is that when I did my board game, Cthulhu Wars, in 2013, that was the year that board games went from $3 million on Kickstarter gross to $50 million.
Jeez.
And
such a big jump right there.
Yeah, it was a huge increase, and then it just kept on getting bigger after that. Right, it's currently one of the biggest categories on Kickstarter, and what it did for me is that before a game like Cthulhu Wars, I could never ever have gotten a publisher to do. It was a large, expensive kind of boutique game, and they would just say, "We got to scale it way down." In fact, I talked to one of the leading publishers about it. And they said $200, and I said, "Yeah, and it's got all this stuff on it." And they said, "Well, we can't do $200. You have to shrink it. You have to do this." And I got a lot of attacks at the time, in reviews saying, "Well, this is a really fun game, but it costs way too much. Obviously, it should be like you could buy 4 regular games for the cost of this thing." So it's obviously grossly overpriced, even though it's a really fun game and the figures are really good. And then some players kind of caught the vision, and they say, You know what? No one complains that their Lexus costs more than a Yugo.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, you have all these MBA style business types maybe saying like, "Oh, it shouldn't be priced at this because this other product in the market is this." But you know the players, you know the game.
Right. If you're eating a steak dinner, you don't complain that it costs more than at Taco Bell right? You just say, I'm glad I'm having a steak. So my feeling is that it's okay for a hobbyist to have one or two luxury games on his shelves that are like 100, 200, whatever amount of dollars. Not every game should be that cost, right?
Yeah.
And not all the games that are produced are that cost, but it's okay to have one or two standout products that really catch the eye, that are really that, right? So Cthulhu Wars, it is $200, but it's not overpriced for what you get. And even the enemies would say, yeah, for what you get is $200. It's just it costs so much, right?
Yeah.
You know, and but now, of course, that's like in the mid range of what these games are costing. So I was one of the.
I think
I guess I was early adopting that concept. But like I said, a regular publisher would never have done it. They would, like, the tooling costs and the shipping costs. The game weighed 11 kilograms. One of the biggest games to come out. But what my key was, and I'd learned this from working on earlier games like Doom. When we were working on Doom, the computer game, we thought, well, this is a really obscure game. Not everyone will like it. It's like you're fighting demons with guns. Who will play this game? But we said, well, there's enough people out there.
That's all right. We have some background noise here. You got a dog.
Some of them will play the game, and if there's enough people who are bent like us, it'll be a success. So I remembered that for Cthulhu Wars, and I said, the purpose of Kickstarter isn't to reach the great mass market of all the millions of people. It's to find the people who are like me, who think this is super fun and are willing to invest in the perfect game for them. And it turned out there was enough of those to make, millions of dollars so far on Cthulhu Wars. I mean, obviously that's not all profit. Most of it's not acted, right? But that's how much. But the gross amount has been that much, which lets me produce all of the items, and then found my company. I can go into other games, and then we're just looking for those guys that have the same vision. And that's the idea, and that's pretty awesome, because it means instead of trying to have a flattened market of, we don't want to offend anybody, let's make this game as bowdlerized and smooth and inoffensive as possible, we can go crazy with it. And so the people that like it really like it.
Exactly.
People that don't like it don't have to buy it, and that's fine.
Let me ask you a question here. And also, I just want to quickly say, I think you're spot on that you're connecting with people that have the same passion as you do. You're creating a product that when you're buying an expensive game or an expensive item, it's not like a chore. It's something you're really excited to get in the mail and excited to show off to people. It's something, you treat it differently. If it's a really quality game and something that's a little bit more pricey, it's more of like a badge of honor to own one, I think, than to feel like, oh, I spent so much money for this thing, but I love it. It's like, it's different. What I wanted to ask you.
So, part of it is that I didn't view myself, I don't view myself as really a businessman exactly. I mean, obviously I run a business, so I guess on that level, by definition, I'm a businessman. But what I view myself as a fan, like the other fans, so that I'm doing the game I want to play and I want to have fun with. And if there's people like me, they might like it too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've noticed looking through your different projects, you have a lot of different funding meters. Like some are at $2,000, some are at $200,000, some are at $1 million and more. One of the bullet points you sent me when we were talking, pre-interview, was that you think it's sometimes worth doing a Kickstarter even if the project is slightly underperforming. I kind of wanted to get a little bit into that. Why do you think that that's the case? Could you share with the listeners a little bit of that?
First, let's take the case of a project that grossly underperforms. Okay? A project that's so bad you have to cancel it. I view a failed project on Kickstarter as a gift straight from God, because now I know not to invest a whole bunch of time and money and research into that project.
Wow, that's a different.
That is so useful. I don't view it as a failure. I say, thank heavens I missed that bullet.
Because it's not wasting any more time. This. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and doing a Kickstarter is there's preparations you make. It's not free. Right, but it's comparatively cheap compared to making the project. Imagine if Ford could have done that before they made the Edsel, right? Or think of any of the mass market flops. If they'd be able to check it out before they did Geely or Giggly, however it's pronounced, the colossal movie bomb.
Yeah.
Right. And so on Kickstarter, I can do that. I can say, oh, people don't want this game. Okay, not doing it. And then when I get a game that slightly underperforms, I can look at it and say, and then I can evaluate, and I can say, Okay, so here's the thing. First off, all of my games are intended to be sold commercially in stores post Kickstarter. Not everyone has that model, but I do. So I'm saying, so for example, right now I'm doing a game. It's called Planet Apocalypse, and it is doing well. Okay, it's paid for itself. It's paid for extra. It's not doing as fantastically as Cthulhu Wars did, and of course I would love to have it do even better. But it is paying. But the point. But it has competing issues. There's two other big Kickstarter projects out right now at the same time that are doing really well, and more power to them. But as a result, I can look at Planet Apocalypse and say, hey, Planet Apocalypse is making slightly less money than because of the presence of these other two competing projects that got started earlier, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not going to affect its sale in stores.
Interesting. Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So if the Kickstarter pays for Planet Apocalypse to come out and reward the early adopters, and then they get that game, was shipped to them before it's in stores, and they're playing it and they're reviewing it and they're talking about it and they're talking it up, that's only going to boost the later store sales.
Interesting. So you're looking at sort of a different channel approach, looking even longer, I guess, a long-term view in that way.
Yes. Now imagine that instead I was just trying to publish a game, right? Well, I would have to get the scratch together to pay for the tooling, pay for the printing, pay for the initial shipment of 3 or 4 or 5,000 copies of the game, then get it into the store channels, then start getting reviewers to play it. By using Kickstarter, I've paid for my first print run, even if the product's made slightly less than I wished it would. Mm-hmm. But I've still paid for it. I mean, I'm over 200% more than what I asked for, right now, and it's going to go. I'm only halfway through, so I've already paid for the game.
I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today.
So it's going to be so that's covered. I don't have to worry about my costs. My costs I had going into the game are also paid for by this. So I'm like, didn't lose any money. Then, because people will be getting the game before it's in stores, I will automatically have free publicity in large amounts without having to do anything special.
From the business owner side, it makes complete sense because you're getting that word of mouth. You're getting people trying this out. They can leave reviews. They can post a blog. They can make a YouTube video, offhand, post an Instagram.
They'll be going to game stores and conventions and playing it. And other people will see the game. And if the game looks spectacular, which is one of the features of my games, is they look spectacular. They have really amazing figures and models and like Planet Apocalypse is full of cool demons and heroes and all this stuff. And when they see it and they go, "Ooh, I want me some of this," and then like they may not be able to get it yet, but they know it's coming up. There's like a brief artificial shortage between the time the backers get it and it gets into stores, and that actually adds to the excitement.
Interesting. I think that's a really good way to approach it, and I think it makes a lot of sense, in particular with your type of business. So thank you for sharing that. That's also, I think, is difficult when you're an artist or a creative type to sort of think of these different business strategies in the way that you are now. It kind of separates, I think, when you're building an actual board game business from people that are just kind of playing around with this. So thank you for sharing that. The other thing I want to ask you here is, when you're putting together a Kickstarter campaign, we could talk about so many different facets here.
I want to say that my board game business, such as it is super tiny. I mean, there's like not very many people in my company. Okay, and like 6, and one time only 4, or one time only 1. Right, so we're minuscule by comparison to other companies, and yet this model has enabled us to have an imprint on the industry as though we're like a medium-sized company.
Yeah, exactly. And you've had multi-million-dollar campaigns. You've been doing amazing work. You have tons of people that have played your game. So for the level of impact that you have, it's profound compared to. It's very highly leveraged, I guess you can say.
Yes, and we'd never have had that without the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. So I would have taken these games and peddled them to some other publisher, and made less money had the game be less impressive because they wouldn't have backed the giant cool figures I have. And of course, there might be less stress on my part of having to follow these through and watch projects go and back and all the drama and angst of that. Since a side effect, I don't know if it's a benefit or a curse, is that since I launched Kickstarters in 2013, I've lost 45 pounds from stress.
Oh my gosh!
I guess it turns out I don't eat when I'm stressed. So I guess I could have been stressed and not lost weight. So I'll take it and count it as like a good thing. But,
the Kickstarter diet plan, right?
But it's not. I would not recommend it as a weight loss plan.
Yeah. I want to get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty here when it comes to your campaign page and the things that you've learned when it comes to backer preferences or putting together a page, that kind of stuff. So one of the things you mentioned is that you were surprised by some of the preferences of your customers or your backers with some of the campaigns that you ran. Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Every single campaign, there has been some kind of surprise that blindsided us. In Planet Apocalypse, one of our artistic choices was that there's two sides. There's the demons versus the humans, and we wanted the demons to be like warm colors, like fire and brimstone and boiling acid and fumes coming up from the depths of the earth. And the humans, we wanted to be cool, calm, and rational, like pale blue, blueprints, that kind of thing. And so we did the monster aspects of the game, the demons, as really intense with blood spatters and stains and all this grotesque stuff. And then the human part was like cool and clean and collected. And it turned out players were like, "Why do you have two conflicting art styles?" And a lot of them didn't like the spare nature of the human part. They said, "Oh, they're too blank. They're too empty. We need more stuff on them." And there was a lot of hostility. Some people say, "I'm not going to back this because I don't like to look at the human cards," and which astounded me, right? And so we reacted to that. We aren't throwing away our original plan, but we are taking the human cards, making them less spare, if you know what I mean.
So you're getting feedback.
We're still not making them red and blood spattered, but we're redacting to the feedback. Like they were very clean, and like for example, the original Trooper cards had a picture of a guy's helmet and then his stats, and that was all. And now we're putting the image of a person on it. We're going to upscale it because one of the good things about Kickstarter is that if we'd published this at a publisher and it had gone out, we would just have people saying, "Oh, well, it's pretty good, but I hate this part of the art style." Or not everyone hates it, right? But it's the haters who talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you like it, you don't say anything. And I'm not complaining. That's just how it is. It's, if I go to a restaurant and I hate it, everyone gets to hear my complaints, right? But because we did it on a Kickstarter, here we are halfway through. We've almost finished changing up all those cards that some people didn't like. And the people that liked the cards still will like these cards, I'm sure. So we're able to make that change during the project and make people happier because we did it on Kickstarter, which we couldn't have done if it had published the old-fashioned way.
That feedback is invaluable. And going forward, even selling the product in the future, you might know to focus on something versus something else, or really how to change things up.
Exactly. Our next upcoming project, we're making sure we get those cards designed well in advance. It goes through several passes so that we'll show it to people. Say, "What do you think? What do you think?" Because it's just not a thing that we had thought of before. And every time we do a project, we find something like that to something new.
Very cool.
To go along. So I guess our company system is that we make every possible mistake in the book, but we only make each mistake one time. Mm-hmm. And the next project, the plan is all new mistakes.
That's a great way to think about it too, because it kind of eliminates that anxiety of putting yourself out there and launching one of these. It's like, oh, I'm going to make mistakes anyway. Might as well learn from them. It's going to happen. Yeah. I might as well just put myself out there and put my projects out there.
Yeah, to make a comparison, I'm a Civil War buff as it happens. Name one of my kids Grant, even after the general. But in the Civil War, you had Grant versus Lee, General Lee, right? Well, General Lee made very few mistakes, but he'd repeat his mistakes again and again. To the end of the war, he thought that his guys could charge trenches and take them. And of course, they never could, right? General Grant made every possible mistake. But again, each time he made a mistake, he learned from it, never made it again. And in the end, who won, right?
Yeah.
So So that's kind of my model, to make mistakes only once.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't
when you're
want to
going
make
into
mistakes,
battle. I think also with these campaigns, a newbie might look at your project and think, wow, this person raised, $300 for a board game, just one unit, or like $200. Like, wow, that's a lot. Do you have any advice on actually structuring rewards or getting people to back at these higher levels, creating attractive rewards? Any advice on that point?
Well, we have changed our model with every game. One of the models that is out there, Cool Mini or Not, has a thing where they have their model is they put a bunch of Kickstarter exclusives out, so that if you so that the only way to get this certain figure or set of figures is if you back on Kickstarter. And the idea is this will get a lot of people to back their game and love them, and it's highly effective. Peterson Games has specifically distanced ourselves from that, and we don't have any Kickstarter exclusives. Everything that you see on our thing, it may not be available in stores, but it'll be available through Peterson Games, at least in limited quantities. Now, in practice, some things sell out quickly and they're not available again. But nothing is. I don't know if you knew that.
And what is the I was looking
and our motivation behind this is not because we think the CMON is bad, but to be contrarian, we know a lot of people dislike the Kickstarter exclusive model, and they've said so vocally on a lot of forums. I won't buy any game that has Kickstarter exclusive gameplay items because that's wrong. I'm not going to argue whether it's wrong or not, but these people, at least when they see one of our games, that's not a deal breaker for them. Mm-hmm. So it's like we're distancing ourselves from this. Instead of just imitating them, we're doing something. We have many ways which we're like CMON. We have giant, awesome figures. We have big strategy board games, but we're trying to find ways to differentiate ourselves too. So to look at us, a Peterson game. Oh yeah, these don't have exclusives, which I love, and these have like really strong gameplay, which I love, and they have really big figures, and then whatever they're the things they're looking at. So there's kind of a contrarian element going on.
And what is this?
In fact, CMON's most recent game, Hate, is a Kickstarter exclusive game. It's not going to be in stores. It's only on Kickstarter, which is like the ultimate development of that trend.
I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is this real backing level that you were talking about? Something that's sort of behind the scenes, I guess, or when you're launching a project, the real backing level? You sent that over in the notes. What exactly did you mean by that?
The real backing level.
Making your real backing level very attractive.
Yes. Okay. So there's different. Here's what this means. Okay. So typically in our projects, there's more than one level you can back the game at. Okay. For example, on Planet Apocalypse. Well, let's go to a previous one, an already successful one. Let's go back to the Evil High Priest game. Now, Evil High Priest made $100,000, well, 97,000 something, but then a little more in pre-production, which was perfect. This was a very inexpensive game, no figures, everything's fine. So on this game, there was 2 pledge levels. There was the core game pledge level, which was $50. Okay, and you just got the core game, which is perfectly adequate to play and nothing else. But then instead, you could pay $80 and get the core game box and the Dark Ritual stretch goal box and the Blood Ceremony game expansion. And it was just like a way better. You were saving a lot more money, and you got all the stuff for just $30 more.
Yeah,
you're like tripling the amount of things you get. So of course, what happened is that of our 1,000 backers, 26 got the low-level pledge, and 932 took the $80 pledge. And of those 26, I bet a number of them bumped it up in the post-pledge to the FSM. So the real level of backing is what we want people to pledge, the big pledge. And so what we do is we have the core game pledge as the minimum one. So they look at the game and they say, like in Planet Apocalypse, we have the $99 pledge. You get a copy of the core game plus all stretch goals. Yay. Okay. But then for $160, you can add like all this extra stuff. And so what has happened again on Planet Apocalypse so far is 90% of the backers are pledging for the upscale version, but there's still the 99 level. So people will look at the game and say, "Oh, I can do it for $99. Oh, for only $60 more, I can get like all this stuff." So the real back-end level we're trying to do is higher than the basic pledge. And we do that by having the real. So there's like they look at the game, say, "Oh, I can do it for only $99." Oh, and then some of them start at $99 or even $1. Then as they sit there watching the campaign or listening to the comments, looking at the updates, they go, "Oh, there's more and more stuff that's attractive on the big level. I think I'll bump up or I'll get this." And then ultimately you have a whole bunch of guys going in at the high level. As an example, with Cthulhu Wars, we got 70% of our money from the highest end backers who just wanted everything. And so the low end guys that just got the core game were a tiny percentage of our income.
That's a really neat trick.
Still getting what they pledged, and presumably they're happy with that. But some of them, after they got it, like with Cthulhu Wars, they got the core game. Then they were like, "Oh man, I wish I'd gotten all that extra stuff." Well, then later on, a couple years later, we put out Onslaught 2, where all the stuff was available again, and we had a lot of guys come in that had only got the core game before, and they'd spent a year pining for the rest, and this was their chance. And again, they were willing to pay $600, $700, $800 to get all the rest of the stuff, and that was a huge, so we got $1 million on that campaign. Then we did it again this year for another $1 million, more backers trying to get those old things. So in other words, while the core pledge is whatever it is, it was $100 or less, $150. We had a lot of pledges that were double, or the average pledge was double or triple that.
I just have one or two more questions here for you, but I really want to ask you. So when it comes to these higher pledges, you mentioned listing out, for example, all the things that someone's going to get, and sort of is like a no-brainer that they're getting so much more value at such just a small difference here.
So they don't have to. If they have to make rent or a car payment,
exactly. They don't have to.
There's plenty of stuff there.
My question is, were you doing anything else to sort of sway people towards this greater pledge? Like, were you sending them emails, maybe underscoring the value of the highest tier, or was this kind of just random that people were going for this high amount? Were you doing any other kind of marketing?
It was all intentional, right? Like what we show the high end tier and say, well, here's the like, for example, we list the retail value of the products, and this is the actual retail value we're expecting to have it be in stores. So the first circle pledge is $99, and you get a $99 value, right? Plus, I mean, once the game goes into stores, who knows? It'll be $99. It might be $120, $100, right? But but then if you get the $159 Fiend value, it's actually the in store worth is $192. Mm-hmm. So you're saving like $40.
Okay, I see.
By getting the Fiend level. Now, of course, you could argue it's like when your wife goes out and brings back something really fancy. Look, honey, I saved all this money. Like in the old sitcoms.
Yeah.
Okay. But she spent So it's kind of like that. They're spending more, but they are saving money. And if they like the game and they like the style and the figures, for only $40 more, you can like add all these extra things that look really cool. Mm. So it's just attractive,
Very
we
well
also
said.
do things like we announce new pledge levels during the course of the campaign. So the idea is people are already kind of bought into the game and they like it and they wanted to get all the stuff. And then suddenly we say, hey, here's a new pledge level where you can get even more stuff and you get even a better value. Now it's worth $300 and you only pay $250 or whatever, right? And then hopefully some group of people will upscale to that.
Interesting.
And they will be happy that they did it because they get more stuff for free. And if you don't upscale, you're still happy you got everything you pledged for, and it's just as good. It's just as good deal as it ever was.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, very cool. So I want to ask. Oh, sorry. You can keep going.
One other thing we've kind of learned is that at one time we did pledges where some stretch goals only applied to certain pledge levels, and then what happened is some people would say, "Well, I'm not excited about this stretch goal because it only applies to this expansion pack, so it's not as interesting to me. I'm not excited about that stretch goal reaching it." Now we did this in Evil Eye Priest to success because what we hated is the core pledge level of $50 didn't include the stretch goal box. But like I said, only 26 people got it, so no one's had. So on this campaign, for example, Planet Apocalypse, everyone gets all the stretch goals. So that's so that everyone is excited about every stretch goal coming up. And we're looking at other things to do in the future, like maybe have multiple stretch goals with a single stretch goal that apply to multiple. We'll just see. We're always experimenting.
Okay.
And we have to, because the nature of Kickstarter and the support fails. When we first started out, you can be kind of amateurish, and actually, if your Kickstarter video was kind of clumsily made and cheap, it was an advantage because they thought, they really need the money. But now everything has to be slick.
Yeah. It's a totally different game, totally different ball game. And I think you have so much experience here that I would love for just our final question here, if you could talk directly to someone just getting started. We covered a lot of advanced level topics here. For a beginner out there in the audience who's just getting started with their first board game on Kickstarter, what would you say to them just sort of briefly for that individual just getting started? It could be advice, could be a word of encouragement. It could be anything like that you'd like to share with them. I
think I would go back to something I said at the very start of this thing, and I would say value failure because you know not to do it. It is not bad to have a Kickstarter fail. It is good. You know that is not the way to go, and thank heavens you found it out now instead of after you'd invested another 6 months of production time and working with manufacturers.
Well said. Sandy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing just a wealth of information. I really want to have you back as well. There's a lot that we can talk about when it comes to board games on Kickstarter. Where can people go and check out your most recent Kickstarter campaign?
My most recent campaign is on Kickstarter right now. It's called Planet Apocalypse, has 14 days to go. That's planet as in planet and apocalypse as in, I guess, the book of Revelation in the Bible kind of thing. And it's about humans fighting demons with really awesome figures. It's a cooperative game.
And you're also known for this sort of horror genre and these really beautifully made games.
Yes, I am famous for horror. And this is a horror. This is actually not so much the Cthulhu type horror, but more the Doom type horror. But I did both, right? So
thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode where I talked with Sandy. We got into crowdfunding, Kickstarter, the things he's learned from these different projects that he's been running. If you want to follow him, go on Kickstarter, search Sandy Peterson. He's run many, many different campaigns. He's probably going to run a lot more in the future. So if you're interested in his strategies, you can look more into his different campaigns. And if you haven't yet, go and check out some of the other archives in this podcast. Go and check out some of the other episodes. I have many, many successful entrepreneurs on this show, and they share with you, just like this episode, how they did it, what strategies they used, what they would do differently, the tools they used, etc. Just dive into the archives, listen to one or two more podcast episodes. I promise you're going to get a lot of value out of it. And also, if you want to listen to more ones, you can hit that subscribe button on the iTunes app, and it will give you a notification when I come out with new episodes, new shows every single week. Finally, if you want access to some of my more content, my blogs, new guides I have coming out, my YouTube channel, new videos that I'm putting together for you, you can go to crowdcrux.com/subscribe and enter your email address there. And that's sort of the best way, I think, to get in contact with me and also to see what I'm doing, seeing what I'm up to. That's crowdcrux.com/subscribe. That link will take you to where you can sign up for the weekly email newsletter. Thank you for joining me on today's episode, and I'll see you next time.